You want to know one of the fastest ways people lose control in conversations. They don't even realize they're doing it. And that's the part that makes it so dangerous. They walk into a conversation thinking they're being reasonable, thinking they're being polite, thinking they're being the bigger person, but without even noticing it, they've handed the steering wheel of the conversation over to the other person. And once you give that control away, it's almost impossible to get it back without looking defensive or weak. And the first way we give away control is this: we talk too much. That's it. It sounds simple, but it's devastating because when you talk too much, you are essentially showing all your cards, giving the other person every piece of ammunition they need to twist your words, poke holes in your arguments, or manipulate your emotions. Think about it. You've probably been in that moment where someone asked you a simple question, maybe even a loaded one, and instead of pausing, instead of breathing, you rushed in. You felt that anxious energy inside, that voice saying, "Don't leave silence hanging, don't look awkward, fill the space." And so you filled it with words. Too many words. Words that spilled over, that gave the other person more than they ever asked for. And what happens next? They use your words against you. In the courtroom, I've watched this play out countless times. A witness gets nervous. The lawyer asks a tight, precise question, and instead of answering it cleanly, the witness rambles. They add detail after detail. They think they're helping themselves by clarifying, by explaining. But what they're really doing, they're opening the door wide for me, for any lawyer to walk through and tear that testimony apart. I don't even have to work hard for it because they've already done the heavy lifting. They've already given me the rope. Now, outside the courtroom, the same principle holds. You're in a meeting, your boss asks, "Why wasn't this finished on time?" Instead of answering directly, you pour out excuses, explanations, backstory, even a little self-defense. You think you're building your case, but what you're actually doing is painting yourself into a corner. You're giving them more surface area to attack, more threads to pull. And suddenly, you're no longer in control of the conversation. They are. And here's the truth: silence is not your enemy. Silence is your power. You don't have to rush to fill every pause. You don't have to justify every breath you take. When someone asks you a question, answer it simply, clearly, and then stop. Let the silence do the heavy lifting for you. It may feel uncomfortable at first, but in reality, that silence is where your strength shows. It signals that you're confident enough not to over-explain, not to beg for understanding, not to chase approval with your words. I'll tell you this: people respect brevity. People lean in when you keep it short. The most powerful witnesses I've seen in trial, they weren't the ones who spoke endlessly, they were the ones who answered in a sentence. Yes, no. That's correct. No fluff, no weakness, no doors left open. And that kind of control is magnetic. It forces the other person to work harder. It forces them to reveal more than you, and it keeps you in the driver's seat. So here's your challenge. The next time you feel yourself spiraling into too many words, stop. Answer the question, then close your mouth, and let the silence speak louder than your explanation ever could. Because when you master that, you master control. Now, the second way we give away control, and this one is even more subtle, is when we react emotionally to every jab, every tone, every provocation. You know exactly what I'm talking about. Someone rolls their eyes, someone raises their voice, someone slips in that sarcastic little comment, and before you even think, you bite, you jump in defensive, you snap back, you get flustered. And in that exact moment, you've handed them control. Because here's the hard truth: the person who controls the emotions in the room controls the room. If they can get you riled up, if they can push you to defend yourself, if they can drag you into an emotional back and forth, they've already won. They're no longer responding to your points. You're responding to theirs. You're dancing to their rhythm, not yours. And I've seen this play out not just in trials, but in everyday life. A rude coworker makes a comment designed to sting. A family member digs at an old wound because they know it gets a rise out of you. And you react. You get angry, your voice rises, maybe your face flushes. You think you're standing up for yourself, but in reality, you've just proven their point that they can control you. Now, I'm not telling you to become a robot. I'm not telling you to shut down every emotion or never let someone see that you care. What I am saying is this: discipline your reactions, because when you react instantly, you're not thinking, you're just surrendering. But when you pause, when you breathe, when you refuse to let their jab dictate your tone, you keep control. In the courtroom, one of the most powerful weapons is objection. But here's the catch: objections aren't shouted, they aren't emotional, they aren't wild. They're calm, precise, and powerful. Objection. That one word, delivered with control, can stop the entire momentum of the opposing counsel. And it's not about volume, it's about presence. That same principle applies to you in conversation. You don't have to react to every jab. You don't have to match their energy. Sometimes the greatest display of power is refusing to give them the emotional reaction they're hunting for. It disarms them, it frustrates them, and it shows everyone watching, including yourself, that you are not someone who can be controlled like that. And the third way you're giving away control in conversations is when you defend what doesn't need defending. Think about that for a second. How many times have you been in a conversation and someone throws out a jab, a half-truth, or even an outright misunderstanding, and before you even think, you're scrambling to explain, justify, clarify, like you're standing trial in a courtroom you didn't even know you walked into? You've seen how control slips when we explain too much. You've seen it when we rush to fill silence, and you've seen it when we give away space that isn't ours to give. But here's another one that's far more subtle, and honestly more dangerous, because it disguises itself as kindness. It disguises itself as being agreeable. I'm talking about the moment you hand over control because you keep saying yes, when everything in you is screaming no. You know what I mean? That moment when someone asks you to do something and instead of pausing, instead of considering what you actually want, you blurt out, sure, no problem. But deep down, you're not okay with it. You don't have the time, you don't have the energy, you don't even want to do it. But you say yes anyway. Why? Because you don't want to upset them. You don't want to look selfish. You don't want to deal with the friction that might come with saying no. And here's the problem. Every time you do that, every time you say yes when you mean no, you're not just losing a little control, you're teaching the other person that your boundaries are negotiable. You're telling them, my needs come second, my time is flexible, my priorities are optional. And once that pattern sets in, guess what? They stop asking, they just expect. They stop checking in, they assume. And you're left resentful, exhausted, and wondering why it feels like every conversation ends with you doing something you didn't want to do in the first place. Let me give you a real-world example. Someone at work comes to you at the end of the day, piles another task on your desk, and says, "Could you get this done by tomorrow morning?" You're already drowning. You already have a list longer than your arm. But instead of saying, "I can't take that on right now," what do you say? "Okay, I'll see what I can do." You've just signed yourself up for another late night, another sacrifice, and another piece of your time slipping through someone else's hands. Or maybe it's in your personal life. A friend asks you to drive them to the airport at 4 a.m. You've got work the next day. You need rest. But instead of saying, "I'm sorry, I can't do that," you say, "Of course." And then you spend the whole drive half asleep and the whole day afterward running on fumes. And do they thank you? Sure. But do they now believe you're the kind of person who will always say yes? Absolutely. And that belief starts to shape every future interaction. You see, the word yes is powerful. It's a gift. But when you give it away cheaply, when you use it as a shield to avoid conflict, it stops being a gift and starts being a leash. You tie yourself up, and the other person doesn't even realize it. They're just walking forward, and you're being dragged along. That's how control vanishes, not because someone stole it, but because you handed it over wrapped in a bow. And here's the kicker: when you keep saying yes out of fear, you actually end up damaging the relationship more than if you'd just been honest, because resentment builds. Frustration simmers. Eventually, it leaks out, maybe in sarcasm, maybe in passive-aggressive comments, maybe in cold silence. And now you've got not just a conversation problem, but a trust problem, because the other person starts to sense that your words don't match your feelings. They start to sense the weight behind your "wes." So what do? How do you take back control in these moments? It starts with one word: pause. That's it. The pause is your shield. Before you answer, before you commit, you give yourself the space to check in with yourself. Do I actually want this? Can I realistically do this? Will this serve me, or will it deplete me? That tiny pause gives you room to respond with honesty instead of reflex. And let me tell you, no, it doesn't have to be cruel. It doesn't have to be a weapon. It can be kind, it can be respectful, and it can still be firm. You can say, I appreciate you asking, but I can't commit to that right now. You can say, I don't have the bandwidth for that, but I hope you find someone who does. You can say, not this time. That's it. You're not a villain for protecting your boundaries. You're not selfish for respecting your limits. You're strong. You're clear. You're in control. And guess what happens when you start saying no with confidence? People respect you more. They realize your yes actually means something. They realize your time has value. And here's the irony: those same people who might be annoyed in the moment will often trust you more long-term, because they know when you say yes, you mean it. They know your agreement is genuine, not forced. That moment right there, that's a handover of power. Because the second you jump into defense mode, you're no longer leading the conversation, you're reacting to it. You've stepped into their frame. They set the rules. They decide what matters, and you've agreed without even realizing it. And here's the twist: most of the time, the thing you're defending doesn't even need defending. It's not an attack. It's not an attack. It's not even true. It's just noise. And yet, you spend energy trying to prove yourself right, to correct the record, to make them understand. But let me tell you something: people who want to misunderstand you will misunderstand you no matter how much oxygen you waste explaining yourself. Now, let me give you an example. Picture this: you're at a dinner table with friends and someone makes a little dig. Oh, of course you'd say that. You're always the dramatic one. Now, you've got two paths here. One is the defensive path. What do you mean dramatic? I'm not dramatic. I just care. I just speak passionately. I'm not like that. And suddenly, you're buried in a 5-minute speech trying to rehabilitate your character in front of everyone like you're running for office. And do you notice what happened? You gave away the power. You let their little comment dictate your response. But here's the second path, the path of control, the path of power. You just smile and say, maybe, or you redirect the conversation, or you let silence do the heavy lifting. Because the truth is, not every statement deserves your defense. Not every accusation deserves your time. Not every misunderstanding deserves correction. And I know what some of you are thinking right now. But Jefferson, if I don't defend myself, people will believe it. They'll think I agree. They'll think I'm guilty. No. What people will actually see is confidence. Because confidence doesn't rush to defend itself. Confidence doesn't need to fight every little battle. Confidence knows that truth is louder than arguments. Let me tell you something from the courtroom. Lawyers will sometimes throw things out there just to rattle the other side. They'll ask a question, make a statement, not because it matters, but because they're watching for the reaction. They want to see if you'll squirm, if you'll stumble, if you'll show your hand. And the rookie mistake, the one that hands them everything, is to react, to argue, to start explaining. But the seasoned pro just sits back, calm, steady, unmoved, because they know not every jab deserves a counterpunch. And that's you. That's your life. How many times are people just tossing little statements your way to see how you'll react? To see if they can rattle you, shift you, control the direction of the conversation. And how many times do you hand them exactly what they want? Think about social media. You post something positive about your life and someone comments, "Wow, must be nice." Now, if you jump into defense, "No, you don't understand. I work hard, I've struggled, I deserve this." Guess what? You just gave that troll the steering wheel. But if you ignore it or just hit it with, "It is nice," now you've kept your control, you've stayed in your frame. This applies at work too. A coworker says, "Oh, you're leaving early again?" Now, if you rush to defend, "Well, no, I came in early, I've finished my tasks, I'm allowed, I'm not slacking." You just fell into their trap. You gave their little comment more weight than it deserves. But if you just smile and say, "Yep," and walk out, you've shown them something they can't argue with calm confidence. And this is the key. When you defend what doesn't need defending, you're teaching people how to treat you. You're telling them your buttons. You're telling them where you're vulnerable. You're saying, "If you want to get me worked up, just throw a little shade here and I'll dance for you." And once they know that, they'll use it every single time. So here's the shift. You've got to learn the discipline of restraint. You've got to practice letting things roll off you without flinching. You've got to get comfortable with silence. You've got to trust that who you are, what you've done, the truth you carry, that speaks louder than your explanations. And listen, I'm not saying you never defend yourself. Of course, there are moments when you need to set the record straight, to clarify, to push back. But those moments are rare, and they're chosen. They're not reactions, they're decisions. And that's the difference. One is you jumping to prove yourself. The other is you calmly choosing to speak because it serves you, not because you were baited into it. Let me take you deeper with this. When you constantly defend yourself, you are actually reinforcing the idea that you're on trial. You're agreeing with the frame that says your worth, your choices, your character need constant justification. And do you know what that does over time? It makes you doubt yourself. It eats away at your confidence. Because now every interaction is filtered through the question, am I being misunderstood? Do they see me wrong? Do I need to explain again? That's exhausting. That's bondage. And it's unnecessary. Because here's the truth, you don't owe an explanation to everyone who asks. You don't owe clarity to everyone who demands it. You don't owe proof to everyone who doubts you. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can say is nothing at all. It's when you let someone else set the rules of the conversation. And I don't mean the polite rules, like who speaks first or how long the pauses are. I mean the deeper rules, the framing, the focus, the foundation. That's where most people lose the fight before they even step into the ring. Someone lobs a loaded question at you. So why are you always so difficult? And you answer it as if it was asked in good faith. You start explaining why you're not difficult, why you're just tired, why they shouldn't think that way. And without realizing it, you've already lost. Because they set the rule, you're on defense, they're on offense. That's the trap. Rude people, controlling people, manipulative people, they don't need to raise their voices. All they have to do is get you to play by their rules. And once you accept their framing, you've given away control without them breaking a sweat. It's the same tactic you see in cross-examinations in a courtroom. If a lawyer asks a yes or no question designed to corner the witness, and the witness plays along without challenging the premise, the whole story gets twisted. The truth doesn't matter anymore. The framing does. So here's the shift. You don't have to accept every frame. You don't have to play on every battlefield they set up. You can pause, step back, and reset the terms. Someone says, "Why are you always so dramatic?" Don't bite the hook. You look them in the eye and respond, "That's an interesting assumption. Let's actually talk about what's happening. You just took the pen out of their hand. You rewrote the question." And that's what control looks like in real time. It's about remembering that you're not obligated to defend yourself against every accusation, every dig, every cheap shot disguised as a question. When someone frames the conversation unfairly, your power lies in refusing to play that game. You're not ducking the issue, you're elevating it. You're saying, "We're not going to wrestle in the mud. We're going to raise this to higher ground." And that higher ground is where truth, clarity, and composure live. But let me tell you the secret: most people miss controlling the frame isn't about dominating the other person. It's not about steamrolling them or winning every line. It's about making sure the conversation takes place on fair, solid ground. When you control the frame, you're not trying to embarrass them. You're protecting your dignity. You're making sure the spotlight doesn't blind you, that the jury doesn't hear only their version. You're balancing the scales. And here's the beautiful part: you don't need clever comebacks or a rehearsed script to do this. You need two things: awareness and calm. Awareness to recognize when the frame is rigged against you, and calm to resist the temptation to dive in headfirst. That's where most people fall apart. They get provoked, they react, they try to defend themselves against unfair accusations. And in that moment, the other person is already in control. But when you stay calm, you buy yourself time. And in that time, you reclaim the frame. Let me paint you a picture. Imagine you're in a hallway and someone suddenly pushes you into a corner. Your instinct might be to swing wildly, to push back as hard as you can. But that's exactly what they want. They want chaos. Now picture instead that you calmly step sideways out of the corner. You look at them squarely. You choose the ground where the fight happens. That's the difference between being trapped and being free. This is where your power lies. Not in talking faster, louder, or longer, but in saying, "Hold on. That's not the question we're answering today." That one line. That's a gavel slam. That's a reset. That's you taking back the courtroom. So here's the ending statement I want you to take with you. In conversations, you don't have to play on someone else's terms. You don't have to accept every question, every dig, every frame that's thrown at you. The moment you learn to pause, reframe, and reset, you stop being the witness on trial, and you become the judge calling order in the court. That's not arrogance. That's self-respect. And that right there is how you shut down control without ever raising your voice.